I didn't know I wanted to be a therapist until probably my early 30s. I going back, I was a troubled, what I would call a troubled youth, a troubled adolescent. A lot of anger, rebellion, hanging out with a rough crowd, and I fell into this crowd, and I got into drugs, alcohol, partying at a very young age. And I remember my parents tried everything to help me. Right? They brought me to people like me. And they all kind of said the same thing, like at this rate, you're going to be dead or in jail before you graduate high school. And they were half right. I actually was pulled out of school in handcuffs for selling drugs when I was 17. No, I was 18. I was in the last class before graduating. So I spent a year in jail before getting my high school diploma. And when I got out, without a diploma and pretty much on my own, I did the only thing I could do really to support myself, and what I knew how to do, was to sell drugs. So jail didn't straighten me out at all. It just taught me some things and really made me more angry at the world. And I got a crew of other people like me. We started selling drugs up and down the East Coast. And I don't, sometimes when you talk to people who get out of this life, they like to brag, and I want to be careful. I don't want this to turn into war stories per se, but I just want to give the scope of what was going on. We were selling to colleges up and down the East Coast, fraternities and partying, living in beach towns. And this went on for a few years. And even though we weren't violent people per se, we weren't hurting anyone overtly. We weren't gangsters. We were more partiers, right? But people were definitely impacted by the drugs that we sold, and I'm just not proud of that at all. And of course, and when I got out, there's always a reckoning when you're selling drugs. There's always, you never make it to it. There's no top to get to. There's always someone else, or there's the police, right? So there was an opportunity for us to, we had a lot of our money towards the end stolen by a rival crew, and we had the option, we had the option to go after them. But something within me, I know now that was God, saying, look, this is it. You don't need that money. You don't need to go do this. It was it would be like crossing a moral Rubicon, right? Like something you can never come back from. So, I decided not to pursue that. And I'm glad. So that was something that I, looking back, I'm just so grateful that even when I didn't know Christ, Christ had me the whole time. But I got out of that lifestyle, and I started to, all right, I'm going to do things. I'm going to start going to school, get my diploma, go to community college, and work whatever, video stores, restaurants, whatever I could do without an education. But the addiction stayed with me. So, I'm doing the right things during the week, but in the weekend, I'm out there drinking, cocaine, doing drugs on the weekend, partying. And then I get into a 4-year school. And about this time, I'm kind of thinking, what do I want to do? First, I was a history major. I'm like, that's kind of cool, interesting stuff. And then I kind of want to help people, because I feel like I'm kind of on the right path, even though I wasn't. I was still using drugs. I was still partying. But it was something within me led me down this path despite that. Even though I hadn't actualized myself psychologically, I still wanted to help other people. And, I joined a fraternity, and I was, it was a big partier. And then I got into grad school, and I started to feel a sense of, a lot of guilt about what I was doing, this double life that I was living. And also a lot of guilt about my past as a drug dealer. So, the drinking, the drugs became a way to numb and escape and not have to deal with the guilt that I had when I was out there selling drugs and just the stuff that we did. So I was on my way to a party, and I was drinking. I was texting my drug dealer, and I smashed into a parked car. No one was hurt, and I just remember, that was it. I was done. Like, someone could have been killed. What am I doing I'm in grad school. Like, I have so many opportunities, and yet it just shows the hold that addictions really have on us. So I got clean. That was January 15th, 2011. That was the last time that I used And 6 months later, I became a Christian. I started going to church at the recommendation of a friend. And I just experienced the power of the Holy Spirit. It was the night of Hurricane Irene. I remember praying in my room, and the trees outside were shaking, and the wind and the rain. And I was listening to worship music on YouTube and praising when the storm came on. And I just remember this sense of peace came over me, and I gave myself over to Jesus Christ completely. I'd kind of been on the fence up until then. Ever since then, it was, the first couple of years anyway, it was, it's not like night and day for some of us. We still have to work through our issues. And even though I wasn't using drugs, I still had some of the anger, the pride, the lust, all that stuff that us in the world, typically just the flesh, right? It's just how we live.
Right.
So I started to, tackle the pornography and the pride, and I was really ashamed about my past, and I started to talk openly about, what I had done, and that really helped with the shame. But until I started going to therapy, I just dealt with an incredible amount of anxiety, just about everything that I had been through, everything that I had done and seen, some traumatic events. And it really wasn't until later in my walk, and I connected with a Christian therapist, that even though I knew Christ forgave me, I wasn't able to forgive myself for quite a period of time. And I finally was able to do that. And I was in grad school finishing up my degree, and I thought, this is secular, right? This is a secular degree. Like, how can I serve the Lord? How can I glorify God through this too? And I kind of fell into, not quite right away, I was working for the state of New Jersey. I was doing some other work, but I eventually transitioned to private practice. And, I wanted to integrate my faith with my skills and kind of market myself to other Christians who are dealing with not necessarily the same things that I was, but, just issues in life, right? Marriage issues, addictions, stress, anxiety, depression. And so that is how I became a Christian psychotherapist.
Yeah. And thank you for sharing that. It's, it sounds like it was, like you said, a long process over many years of kind of coming to this point. And did you grow up in a Christian household, or was there religion in your household from a young age, or was this like a totally new concept for you at that time? Yeah,
I grew up Catholic household, and so I have many Catholic friends that it was on me. I never pursued a relationship with Christ at that point, and there were plenty of great people who tried to help me through. My parents, very devout, have relationships with Jesus, and there was a couple mentors that tried to help me. And there was also some mentors, I don't want to call them mentors, but there were people that took advantage of me too. There was a priest who, I had my first experience with hard drugs with when I was younger. So that, there's a lot of confusion about my faith, as I started to explore the idea of God later on. I started to go to a non-denominational church when I came back to Christ. I don't want to say came back. I wasn't really living that Christian life at all. It was just a thing. It was a cultural thing for me. It was you go to mass on Sundays, and that's about it. And I went through the confirmation and all that, but I really didn't have a relationship with the Lord.
Yeah. Wow. And you said that moment that you hit that parked car. So that was a moment where it was like your eyes were kind of open to what you were doing with your life, and it was like a real moment that just shifted your perspective on everything.
Yeah, it was like there was already an internal change happening, but I hadn't quite gotten there yet. And then once I hit the car, I ran. I later turned myself in. There was no one there, it was like I just couldn't get over the fact that someone could have been in that car and I could have killed them. And there was no passenger in my car. It was just me driving. I had my seatbelt on. It was just like, that wasn't the worst I had done by any means. And it and it was a big deal, but it wasn't, they're selling the drugs. There's all kinds of stuff that you see while you're doing that. But it was just like I was just so tired and just done. And I just knew that something had to give. It was just an internal conflict with the kind of life that I wanted to live. And I just knew that was the Holy Spirit working within me the whole time.
Yeah. And it's so interesting to me, you mentioned about being in prison at a reasonably young age, right? And was there a rehabilitation process there where were you introduced to therapists in the prison system, or did they try to help people who were going through that process? Because that would seem like, a lot of people talk about how it's kind of a transformative process, but it's interesting to me that for you it didn't straighten you out, like you said. You kind of came in and then you came out again.
Yeah, that's a really good question. So I got in trouble as a juvenile too, and I went through a juvenile program where I did have a lot more support, and I was young and I just wasn't ready for it. In jail, there are programs. There was a social worker that I saw, and she was great. I just I wasn't ready for that, and so later on in my career, when I worked for the state of New Jersey, I did sit on a prisoner reentry committee where we tried to link the gaps between rehabilitation, employment of people coming out of prison. And there is a need for that. There is definitely a need for services within the prison systems too. But this was back in 1997 when I was in jail. So it was also a different state. This is in Virginia. I don't want to compare Virginia to New Jersey per se, but definitely decades ago things were different. And we're seeing a push now so I earned my executive pardon from the governor of Virginia back in 2020. I applied for that, and they did a bunch. They did research. There's a process they go through. But this isn't something that was done 2 decades ago. You couldn't really get expungements and pardons and things like that.
Yeah. Wow.
So I think we're on the right track. But just to answer your question, back then it just was not. I wouldn't. No one could have said anything to me. It's just the same thing when I'm working with a client. If they're not ready for change, it doesn't really matter what I say.